Do you hate slopers? I used to be just like you. But now, slopers are one of my favorite types of holds. They do not hurt your fingers, and once you understand body positioning, it's one of the easiest holds to hold on. The crazy thing about slopers is that most beginners and intermediate climbers hate them just because they don't understand how they work. You can turn one of these horrible holds from impossible to easy just with a few tricks. Which is why I'm gonna break down the 3 steps you have to do to hold a sloper the right way. And stay until the end because I'm gonna add a few exercises so that you go from a sloper hater to a sloper lover. Keep in mind, these steps have an order. So follow all 3 and in this order to get the best results. Step 1. Find the best spot on the hold. Now, this seems super easy, but sometimes it's not as clear. You have to think about where you're coming from and where you're going to. Think about the previous hold in relation to the sloper. Sometimes it will be a side pull or you'll be just right under it. Especially if this sloper has a few features or grooves, you can take a huge advantage of just a little bend in the hold to pull much more. Now on this dynamic V4, there's a huge sloper. As you can see, most chalk marks are on the middle of the hold, but this is wrong. The trick for this sloper, even though you're going from left to right, is to hold it on the top. Why? Because even though you're trying to go right, the momentum you have from the previous movement is more than enough. What you need on this sloper is to stop time, to move slowly, and to find some control. Which is why, if you grab it from the top, you can even hold on to it with one arm. The trick is always find the best spot. Now, a little tip is slopers are very friction dependent. So the more surface you can contact with, the better. Step 2. Create an opposing force. Now, this sounds kind of complicated, but it's not. After step 1, where you find the perfect position for the hand, you're going to try to make your elbow be perpendicular to that area. So if it's a side pull, move your elbow to the side and you're gonna end up at 90 degrees with a hold. Now, the opposing force part is you can create so much more tension on the hold just by using your feet. So if it's a side pull and, for example, you snare, you'll be able to hang much better. Now, on this red sloper, you can see that while my hips were under the hold, it was easy. But as soon as they started getting away from the wall, my friction was lost and the surface area was reduced, and therefore I fell. So as much as possible, you want to try to wrap the hold. That can be done even if you're not just under the hold. This is why when you're doing side pulls, if you can snare really hard, you can kind of wrap around to the hold and get so much more friction. Now, one of the big mistakes people do with slopers is thinking that they can't bend their arms. Now, on easy grades, you might just be able to get away with it just by lowering your hips. But once things start to get even harder, you're going to have to use power to get through moves, which is why you need to be able to bend your arms. You have to focus on keeping your elbow close to the wall. If it's far away, your hips and your whole body is going to move away from the hold, lifting up the palm of your hand, which is going to reduce the amount of contact you have with the surface. So the sloper, you're going to have less percentage of your hand on the sloper and you're slowly going to peel off. But by moving your hips, your elbows closer to the wall, you're going to be able to keep that friction on and move with power or whatever you need to move to the next one. Now, these tips are great, but if you truly want to set up yourself for success, it's important to understand the key movements you need to be able to do when climbing slopers. But don't worry, this is going to be fast. I was editing this video when I got a message from my arch nemesis, Jenny Benny 7547. I'm sorry, I wish I had such a cool name as Jenny Benny, but I'm called Marcos, and that is a sad name. But maybe you're right, I can get a personality. Okay, my last option. Is this okay, Jenny? Well, I tried. If you cannot lift your hand completely above your head, you're not going to be able to get as much as you can from slopers. Even if it's just at a slight angle, this is going to be a huge difference. One of the most important things is shoulder mobility. So always warm up with shoulder mobility. This is something I mentioned in my warm-up video, so if you want to go and check it out, feel free to do so. Now, another one of the most important movements in slopers is this cupping movement. Most people just do pull-ups like this or on the fingerboard, but this is not going to be a huge help when it comes to slopers. What you want to do is you want to do a false grip. So you bend your wrist, and this is going to aim a lot more at this lower portion of the forearm when doing pull-ups. And the third exercise is where you hinge your legs a little bit in front of you, and this is going to change all the dynamics of the pull-up. It's going to make it much harder, but it's going to give you a lot more core strength, and it's going to allow you to keep your hips under the hold much better. So when you're climbing slopers on a roof, you are not going to peel off. Now, I always want to leave a little surprise for people that stay until the end. So I'm going to give you 2 small tips that will make a huge difference when climbing on slopers. Tip number 1 is something we've all heard, but it's so important, I'm going to repeat it. Brush and brush a lot. If you have excess chalk on the hold, this will not increase your friction. It will diminish it. So clean up the hold and clean up your hands. This leads to tip number 2. Keep your hands cold or as cool as possible. When your hands are warm, your hand gets covered in a small layer of moisture. That does not help us on slopers. So what you want to do is take longer breaks, fan out your hands, even if you want, put it in front of a fan or an AC, cool down, let your heart rate lower so that your whole body is a little bit cooler, then chalk up again, take off the excess, and go and sand your project. If you found this video useful, then check out my bouldering technique playlist and you'll find a ton of useful stuff to reveal your true climbing potential. Stay crispy.